She went to Texas and came home with no boots, no hat.
Postcard.
Whenever we would go somewhere, we'd always send people we liked postcards. Hello, everybody. Tom Matuska here. We have Thursday Afternoon Live for the Matuska Taxidermy Supply Company, along with Brett Wingfield. And we're going to try to show you some more about reference material. And things sure did change around here, didn't they?
They did. It turned yellow.
Duck hunting weather.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, we have rain, and we had sleet, and we had hail, and it was pretty miserable here yesterday.
It was cold.
It rained a lot.
Yep. I think all the beans are gone. The corn's coming out.
Sure.
It is a different place than it was 2 weeks ago.
It changed in a hurry. Yep, 2 weeks can make a big difference. So if you followed us last week, we showed you how to make reference material. And we had a bunch of different samples here. Brett has a musky throat over here, a northern throat, I think. And here's a half of a bass. And we poured over our little bass specimen, we poured a plaster shelf, or a little plaster mold is what it will be, and we're going to show you today how to make a positive out of that. But a lot of you will say, why do that? What good does this do for you? You know, what good is it? It's not a real fish. You're not going to paint it. You're not going to give it to a customer. The reason is, and like I said last week, people say, what's the hardest thing to do and make look good? And it's the thing you know the least about. By pouring something like we did last week, and we're going to finish that up this week for you, and having something like this to hold in your hand, this tells you all kinds of things about shape and different little indents and things that the real fish has, which you can't remember that kind of thing. I can anyway. Most people don't remember the details. They know if it looks a little bassy, but they're gonna forget the important stuff that really differentiates your work from somebody who doesn't use good reference material. This is an example of a bass that we have going in our shop, and any of you that have done fish, and this doesn't just apply to fish, it applies to bird feet or deer noses or eyes. It applies to every part of taxidermy is susceptible to shrinkage. And on this bass, you can see the white up here. This is like a fix-it sculpt material. There's a lot of good rebuilding epoxies. There's fix-it sculpt, there's epoxy sculpt, there's clay, there's lots of magic sculpt and all kinds of different sculpting materials, and they all have different attributes. Some of them feather out really, really easy. Some of them mix really easy. We used to have some in the old days that by the time I got A and B mixed together, my fingers were so sore I couldn't feather it anymore. PC7, we used to use PC7, which is kind of a marine epoxy. Some people still use that. But this area of the fish shrinks dramatically. No matter how good you skin this out, it's going to shrink in, and it's going to look like a prune. You know, I always say the top of your head will look like a prune. There are taxidermists, and I think when we first started out, we didn't do anything with that. We painted it dark. It's up on the wall. Nobody saw it until you compare it to somebody's work that recreated the top of the heads and the bottom of the jaws by using a cast like this, or the real fish. You can use the real fish also. But by copying this into that epoxy material, you're going to recreate the shape that the fish was. It makes all the difference in the world in your taxidermy work.
It really does. It really does. And it also helps in just arranging your skin when you're mounting your cheeks. That's something that people have a tendency to overfill cheeks. And with a good fresh cast, you can see that cheek is fairly flat.
No chipmunks.
No chipmunks. But lots of stuff, tons of stuff to learn just by doing that. The depth of the
bass
eye
eat a whole bunch of minnows, they got to store them when they go like hamsters?
I think they do, but maybe not right
Not that much?
But yeah, great information from a reference cast, depth of the eye set, angles, lots of stuff here to consider. So you'll find the more reference material you have, the more you use it, and the more you use it, the more you'll observe, and like you said, very quickly their work will improve and improve upon itself and improve and improve and improve, and pretty soon it's going to be really nice.
And like we said, don't think of just a fish head, or you can make molds of the tail. You had, I don't know what happened to them, but the other day you had one of your favorite casts. I know when you're judging at shows is the little pockets behind the fins, front and back. This muscle and this pocket back here are critical for how that fin lays, and somebody who has a little 3D mold that they can hold and then go, oh, that's that shape. I mean, I can look at this little pectoral fin right here and I can go, oh, that's what that looks like. Look at the indent on the top and the bottom where that fin can lay nice and flat. You don't know that unless you have something like this to go by. And if you were to mount that fin and forget that little crease, those little creases, that fin is going to sit on top of everything, and it wouldn't lay natural when the fish is swimming, and he wouldn't swim hydraulically.
Hulk fish that have big muscles sitting out in front of their gills.
And it might be we have molds, we have casts and molds of deer noses, like we listed them all. I mean, I can just go up and down the line. We got northerns and grizzly bear and elk and caribou and all kinds of different casts. If something comes in really, really fresh, don't be afraid to make a mold of it and cast it for future. We've had fox. Fox is a good one. Everybody has access to fox, and and bobcats, and that's a face that is very, very intricate. It has to be aligned properly. It has to be wide in the right areas, narrow in the right areas, and with a nice bobcat face, a cast from a bobcat mold or a fox, it's way easier to take that mannequin and go, how come that mannequin doesn't look like my cast does? And you're able to recreate that. And that's what we do here. We rebuild top of the heads. These lips were all reconstructed. All these little mandibles were rebuilt, bottom jaw rebuilt. And now you have to be careful. We always tell when we teach students, overbuilt is not good. Underbuilt is much better than overbuilt. So if you're wondering how much to put on and you've already, think you've built it up, stop. Because you can turn a fish into a Walt Disney fish from the Nemo show really, really rapidly. So be careful not to overbuild, but do rebuild these things. And even, the vents down here, all different kind of areas it's nice to have. We even make molds of fins that we can use as impression pads. I think we've showed you how to do that before. There's a lot of different methods of making casts and molds. Okay, so tell them what you've done. This is the largemouth bass mold that we pulled off, and we used plaster, and we just mixed plaster. We put a little bit of aluminum sulfate in it to speed it up and to close the cells on the fish so we didn't react with the slime, and it came off very nicely. And then what'd you do with it?
After that, we let it dry, and it dried most of the week. And you can kind of tell it will feel cold for a day or two.
And that's kind of how you can tell.
Yeah, you can really tell, and it'll also lose a little bit of weight. You can physically feel that water weight going away. But once we knew it was good and dry, then we sealed it with sanding sealer, just a regular sanding sealer at the hardware store. And I thinned that sealer just so it didn't take up too much of the detail. We painted on. You'll notice the very first coat you put on, even the second coat will really soak in, and it what we're trying to do is seal the pores of the plaster, I think. And we put 3 coats on this and let it dry thoroughly in between, and then we waxed it. And we better explain how to wax stuff.
Well, and what you're alluding to is preparing the surface and putting mold release on. And I've been in the molding business my entire life, and if you ever go to this effort and make a nice mold, I mean, that detail on that mold, I don't think could be better. There's nothing we could have done to make that nicer. But to make the positive out of that and have it not come out is a real bad day, because you've gone to all this work. Waxing, first of all, had we taken that plaster mold, and we're going to use a wax, there's a lot of different waxes in the market. If you want something quick and easy that you can get, go to the hardware store and get Johnson & Johnson's paste wax. It's like a furniture polish. It's a great, many mold makers that pour products out of their molds use Johnson & Johnson's paste wax. It works good. There are waxes made specifically for preparing molds, and we use Partol number 2 paste wax, and it's a green wax. It's the kind of thing that you would I'm gonna get it open, but here we get it. You know, pull out a big knife, a big Bowie knife. And most paste wax are exactly that. They're in a pasty type form. You know, this is green, and you can kind of see when you put it on. Smells like there's a solvent in it, like mineral spirits or turpentine. Johnson & Johnson paste wax also is kind of a beige color, and it has a turpentine smell to it. But any of the waxes, now, there aren't too many people that are old enough to know how to wax stuff. Ask your dads if they ever waxed a car, because it is an art that people don't do anymore. And the reason Brett's laughing is because it's probably the most difficult thing I teach somebody around here. They do not get the concept of Mr. McGowie, what's his name?
Mr. Miyagi.
Miyagi. Wax on, wax off. You have to do it right, or you're completely wasting your time. Anyway, had we put the paste wax on the raw plaster mold after it dried, that paste wax gets absorbed into the plaster, and it's not going to release anything. I think the mineral spirits or the thinning agent in here probably evaporates, and the paste wax just doesn't do its job. Hence, you sealed it first, so we have a surface that the paste wax will not absorb into the plaster. It's going to stay on the surface. Now, once he put the sealer on there, the sanding sealer, we take a little rag, any kind of a rag, dip it in your paste wax, and you're going to, I'll do it on this for, I don't want to ruin this because it's ready to pour, but you're going to work it into every little crook and cranny. Am I going to confuse them doing this? Nope.
Nope.
Now you're doing this to the mold. And you're going to just kind of massage it in there. Work it under every little crack. If there's places you can't get, go ahead and take a little brush and work it in there. And little circular motions work exceptional. Then, once you've covered the entire mold with paste wax, it has to set. Different times of the year, it dries faster than others. Now, I was somewhere this morning at the hardware store, and they had a barometer there, or a, what's it called? Not a barometer.
Humidity.
Humidor, maybe.
I think that's
but it tells humidity. Anyway, it was 35%, and I thought 35% because we've been fighting humidity for the last few weeks, pouring urethane and that sort of thing, and high humidity dries slow. So had I waxed the mold and the humidity would have been like summertime, it might take all day for that mold to dry. Or you can take a hairdryer and you can dry it with a hairdryer. That's perfectly safe to do. This time of the year, when we're making fiberglass molds and we're waxing them like to pour mannequins, we will wax them and put them in the sun, and they dry before you can do another piece, they're ready to go. So when the humidity is down around, 30, even 40%, it dries very fast. Yeah. But don't be afraid to, if you're in a hurry, take a hairdryer and dry that mold. And how many did you put on? 3?
3. I did do 3.
3 coats. Now when we do a fiberglass mold, like on the XP forms, when we got a good fiberglass mold and we're gonna wax and buff, we will do 10. And that's a painstaking and takes a lot of time. And once it's dry, you'll feel it. And then you're gonna take a soft rag, terry cloth towel's fine, just something soft. Not crunches of Bondo in it or fiberglass or plaster or anything like that. And you're going to buff it off and you're gonna feel it. It's gonna feel much different than it did before you put a coat of wax on. It's something to practice, and I put a lot of emphasis on waxing, but it's kind of important, isn't it?
It's so important. I can't emphasize how important it is. And you always told us that you had to be able to see your reflection in the surface.
I learned that from Daryl Kuhn.
I remember from Bubby.
Bubby Kuhn worked for us, and he was a mold builder, and he would not let anybody pour a mold or make a fiberglass reproduction fish until you could see your reflection in the surface.
Yep.
And that takes a lot of coats.
It does. There's some elbow grease in that.
And when you do that, it's going to come out.
Yep.
Right, we've got a few people tuning in. We've got Juliana Stark, who says hello, Tom and Brett.
Hi, Juliana.
How are you?
We've got Emery Stapleton from Indiana. AJ, we've got Keith Blankenship. He says, hey from Virginia. And then he also just tuned in a new comment. Let's see where it went. He says, I've been doing taxidermy for over 20 years and love learning more and more. And just to say thank you guys.
Oh, wow. Very nice.
This stuff that we're doing, to me, is probably one of the funnest parts of the whole business. And I've told you all this story more than once when my wife and I first got married, and I always say I was a taxidermist for 20 minutes, and I wanted to make a muskie lure. And around here, all the old fishermen said the muskies are eating all the perch, muskies are eating all the perch. So what do? You create a perch-like muskie lure. So I would take a perfectly good perch, but I could only catch great big ones. I couldn't catch little ones. And I would catch these perch, and I would make, all I had was plaster. I don't think Bondo was invented. Cars weren't, so they didn't do fenders or anything like that at that time. I didn't have Bondo. But I would use plaster exactly the same way that we showed you how to do this. And I would pour half of a perch, and I'd let it set up, flip him over, take the perch out so he didn't cook, wash everything up, put him back in. I'd put a mold release on my 2 layers, because this is, we call this a shelf. I'd put a mold release out here, and I always use something like Dawn soap, or there wasn't no Dawn either. I think it was Ivory at those days. And I would pour the other half of the fish. Then I would take it apart, and I'd let it dry, and then I'd treat it exactly like you described by sealer. I'd put sealer on it, and then I'd wax and buff, wax and buff, wax and buff. And then I would make fiberglass fish, because we didn't have auto body putty. I'd make fiberglass perch. Well, then I got to put hooks in them. Well, of course the hooks are going to pull out, which if I ever caught anything on them, they would have, but I never caught anything on them. The other problem I had was these perch weighed in excess of a pound already. When they were living, they only weighed half a pound, but now they weigh a whole pound. And so I would put a wire in there, and so that the hooks could be on a wire that went the whole length of the body. And I broke more than one fishing pole trying to throw them. Now baits are the norm that big. You have many of them that would break any of the old fishing poles I had. So when you start doing this, it's so exciting that you can't wait to take something out of the mold. And I did this day in and day out, and I had lots of taxidermy work to do. And my wife would come home from teaching little kids at school, and she'd say, and we got house payments to make, and she'd say, honey, hope she's not listening. She's not listening, right?
I doubt it.
Oh, and she'd say, honey, how'd you do today? Did you get something mounted? We got a house payment coming up on Thursday, and oh, I worked like a dog. I just worked like a dog. And I've got all these seconds that would never even make a musky lure because they didn't turn out, because I didn't mold release it, or I broke something, or I dropped something. And I just about destroyed our young marriage because I couldn't stop doing this fun stuff. So it does get exciting, taking something out of the mold to see what you get.
That's like trapping.
It's like trapping. It's exactly like trapping. Okay, so we think this is ready to make a positive out of.
One more step. We did one more thing off
You're
camera that after we waxed and buffed and could see our reflection, not quite, but almost, you thought we should do one more insurance step just in case.
This is PVA, and it's Pardal film. It is made by the same company that makes the paste. It's PVA is polyvinyl alcohol. And polyvinyl alcohol, if you open it up, it's a little bit thick. It smells like alcohol, rubbing alcohol. And what I've always referred to it as is plastic sealing wrap, like not sealamine balm,
like cellophane?
cellophane. Yeah, it's like liquid cellophane. So it's a great barrier mold release to put in your molds. And I just took a regular paintbrush, dipped it in the Pardal, and brushed it. You can see it's got a green cast. And that dries down, and if I wanted to, I could hook the edge of it and I could peel it off just like plastic wrap, just like saran wrap.
Super, super thin, maybe even, what, half the thickness of saran wrap?
Yeah,
It's
and it's
really
nothing that's
thin
going to
layer.
inhibit any kind of detail. You're not going to lose any detail, but it dissolves in water, and it will make it almost a guarantee that your positive is going to pull out. Now, the one thing I will caution you about using plaster is, or a rigid mold, I guess I should say, is when we make our positive, it's probably a good chance we may suffer some damage on the mold. Any rigid mold like this that has undercuts, and this bass has some little undercuts in his jaws. His jaws aren't flat. They're probably not, a nice sphere. So the plaster actually got down and around and under and up under these little gill bones. So depends on how we get it out, how long we wait. We may suffer some damage to some of these.
And that's because we're going to make a positive that's a rigid positive. Now, if they wanted to do a rubber positive or a flexible positive, maybe some of that detail
they'll all
would come out a little
Yep.
bit better. But we're sticking with rigid materials for this section. We'll probably move into some different
We're going to show you all different kind of ways.
Yep.
So this is as easy and inexpensive as you can make. You could make that out of plaster if you want. We use a lot of auto body putty, and so we're going to have a rigid mold, and rigid means there's no flex to it. We will also show you how to make a rubber mold, right? A flexible mold.
Yep.
And we're going to make a rigid positive, which is going to be hard like this.
And
you can mix and match those too.
And we like these in the shop. They're durable. They withstand students and our professional organization and things like that. But we're going to make a Bondo positive from our plaster mold. And our Pardal is dry, our PVA. We put that on, how long do you think it took? We hit it with a hairdryer, probably doesn't take.
It dries fast.
Yeah, it's really quick, so.
Kind of like the nurse at the clinic when they put alcohol in your arm and then they give you a shot. Where'd the alcohol go? It's gone. Like
Drink
that
it.
fast.
Drink it. So that dries plenty fast, and we're ready to go with that. Now, we're
Okay,
going to confuse them, aren't we?
You trust me to make you some?
Yeah.
All right. Now, anybody has any questions, type in because this can be confusing. Any of this stuff. Don't be afraid to text in. We'll answer you. Okay. Auto Body Putty comes in a lot of different brands. We refer to it as Bondo because Bondo is probably the first and most popular auto body putty out there, and it's been around for a long, long time. Auto Body Putty comes in different colors, comes in all different varieties, but it's almost like soupy peanut butter.
Yeah, yeah.
But it doesn't, I can't pour it out of the can. I can, but not very easily. So it's a polyester product. It's plastic. It's what your wife goes and smashes up the fender or puts a dent in the fender. You're going to take it to the body shop, and when nobody's looking, they're going to scratch that up and put some holes in it. They're going to smear that Bondo over there, rasp it down, put a coat of paint on it, and you're not going to find out if your wife did. My wife does stuff like that.
I was gonna say, I hope your wife's not watching.
Anyway, so that's what this is for. It's a plastic filler for fixing small repairs on vehicles. It's, for me, essential in the taxidermy shop. We've used Auto Body Putty forever. You can get it at Walmart. You can get it at any implement store, hardware stores. Most of them sell some form of Auto Body Putty. We get the least expensive that we can because the expensive ones all have some kind of filler or strands in them to make them more durable. We want something soft that we can work with. Most of our Auto Body Putty involves rasping and shaping and things like that. So we don't want a real heavy-duty reinforced one. So anyway, here's the Auto Body Putty. Now, it sets up too. When you buy the Auto Body Putty, you're going to get a cream hardener. Cream hardener will come in a little tube like this. This much, that's your catalyst, this much will set up this, 11 pounds of Auto Body Putty. So they recommend, there'll be directions on the back, but 1 inch per golf ball size. So if you can imagine, you put a dollop out there and you put 1 inch in it, stir it all up, and 10 minutes it should harden up rock hard. Should solid up real nice. Okay, problem is I can't pour this in there, and if I pour it in there, we're not going to be able to get it rotated around. There's another product called Polyester Resin, and Polyester Resin is, in my mind, it's fiberglass. When you fiberglass a canoe, fiberglass is made up of fiber and plastic glass. This is the glass portion of fiberglass. If I were to pour a little bit out here, it's real runny. It's like syrup. That's the glass portion of fiberglass. So I did have a chunk of the fiber too. That's all right. Now I'm going to mix you up some. These can be mixed together to make the Auto Body Putty pourable. So I'm gonna mix a little more than I really need.
So for lack of better terms, that Auto Body Putty is just kind of a thickened version of the polyester resin, maybe?
I'm sure if you talk to the Auto Body people, they would say absolutely not,
Yeah,
but to me it is.
The body guys would get mad at us for saying that, but.
Okay, now, like I said, Auto Body Putty, there's no pouring it. I can't pour it into that mold yet. So we're going to take some polyester resin, and polyester resin comes in all kinds of different varieties. Like we've had catalogs. You can buy polyester resin for whitewater canoes and kayaks, so that it's resilient. It's got a lot of flex in it. You can get flexible polyester resin. All different varieties of polyester resin. This is just basic laminating resin, which we use in the shop to make deer molds and things like that. So I'm going to start by pouring just a little in here. The more you put in, it seems like the longer it takes to set up. And I put in, I would say, a fifth maybe.
So if you have, what do you have, a quarter cup of Bondo in there maybe?
Maybe half, maybe.
Half
Yeah,
a cup?
yeah.
And you put in maybe a teaspoon?
Yeah, now if you can see, I didn't put in very much. And you can experiment. Now, if, oh man, it's way too thin, and it's plenty thin, I could put in more of the other. It's like cooking. It's, the worst that's going to happen is it's going to be too salty.
That could happen.
But now, look at this. This is pourable.
Now that's going to pour just as nice as your resin did.
Probably because it's too much resin.
That's okay.
Okay, now cream hardener, 1 inch per golf ball of the putty. That's for body shop applications when you're trying to smooth and you need some time and you got to feather it out. We want a little bit of speed here, especially because we're against the clock in our little 1-hour presentation. So I'm going to put in more than an inch. I'm going to put in about, I probably put in 5 or 6 inches.
That's a lot.
That kind of was, but I've seen you rotate a mold before, and you're fast
We could be
at
here
it.
all day. But it's kind of like toothpaste if you're, the hardener itself is. So if you can imagine squirting out just a little bit of a toothpaste on your toothbrush, that's about the same consistency. And I noticed you used white hardener. That's different than what came with the can of Bondo.
The hardeners come in, typically the hardener we get is blue. I've seen red and I've seen green.
Yeah.
We like white because we do so much rock work, I think. And if we do any fish work where we don't want a big blue spot, you know, that to fix, and on our rocks, blue and red is harder to hide. This makes a nice gray base.
Yeah.
The only thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you be sure that you mix it real thoroughly.
Yeah.
So you don't get soft spots.
And with the colored catalyst,
You can see.
you can see when your mix is thorough, you don't have any marbling. With the white catalyst, it is harder to see, so you just have to mix it and trust yourself and over mix it. Highly recommend over mixing it.
There you go.
And so this is what we have for consistency now. And shall I pour it?
Sure.
And we're going to pour this resin into our mold, and we're just going to kind of swirly it around. And guys that pour a lot of stuff will tell you pour in one place, pour slowly, let it migrate and do its own thing, because what's happening is it's pushing the air out ahead of itself. We're not going to spend too much time pouring, but I'm going to pour somewhat slow. And the longer the ribbon is, the skinnier, narrower ribbons, you'll have some of the air bubbles in it will tear and pop as the resin comes out of the cup. So that's desirable too. What we want to have ideally is a bubble-free cast to refer to. And you can see it's so nice and thin that it's coming in and taking up all of that detail. So it's going to pick up all that really nice scale texture and all of those maxillary bones and apical, the front of
I
the
don't know if you need that.
pectoral fin. I'm just going to swirly it around a little bit and let it get all the way up there. I poured it kind of thick.
Now sometimes we have thick ones and we have thin ones. This is thick. Our thinking is thick ones won't break as easy. We even have ones up there that we made a really thin shell and then filled them with foam to make them lightweight. And I was in, nice tip for you guys, Home Depot yesterday, and Home Depot has a spray foam, like the little foam cans, with hard foam.
Oh, really?
And I can't remember what it was called. There's a reason for it, for some construction purposes, but like the little spray foam cans that you put between sockets or as a weather stripping. This was firm, and they had a little pile of it out there, and I would say it was not quite 3-pound density, but it was firm enough it would work really good for base work and making nice bases.
That would be handy. Don't tell Mandy.
I know. I did not bring it up to the catalog lady. That's going to drop in your little pants. Pants. I said pants. Okay, just to recap. While he's doing that, auto body putty. We take auto body putty and we're going to make a positive cast. Remember, your molding process is 2 parts. The negative is the mold. The positive that we want to end up with is a cast. Auto body putty makes a great cast. Auto body putty is a little bit too thick. So we get polyester resin and we pour a small amount of polyester resin. We always have polyester resin around the shop because we do a lot of molding here. You can get polyester resin in a lot of hardware stores. They sell it as kits. You might get a little yard of cloth or something. But polyester resin, mix a little with your auto body putty, and don't forget the hardener. And that's the one thing Brett was talking about. The white hardener, you can't tell if you put it in. So it's possible that you forget. All of a sudden you're stirring and stirring and stirring and forgot the hardener because you can't tell. Yeah. Red, green, blue might be a better color for you forgetful people.
Or beginners that
haven't
mixed it before. And we are already set because you put plenty of hardener. But Bondo, for those people that haven't used Bondo before, Bondo goes through a kind of a flash state where it starts to harden. And you can see now I can touch this and it's not all liquidy, but it's still very rubbery. If you can see what I'm doing here, this piece would break very easily. So although it's gelled, it hasn't really cured. So I think we probably want to let this go through its heat stage, which I can feel it's starting to warm up now, before we pull it out of the mold.
There's kind of a happy medium because this is going to turn rock hard.
Yep.
And this is rock hard. You can damage stuff getting it out. If you take that out while it's real rubbery, you might get it out in one piece without damaging anything, but chances are you're going to tear it. So there's a perfect time to take that off, so you're going to want to watch it a little bit.
I'm going to show them right here how easily it breaks right now. So this was dropped over the bottom, and we would not have gotten it off if I'd have let that sit there for too much longer. It went all the way around, but at this stage, it's real rubbery and easily broken off. So I just broke that little piece back, and now we'll be able to get it out real easy. But it's very, very rubbery, easily broken. I wouldn't want to take him out now because all your pretty detail would crumble just like that.
Okay, now you fish people that want to attempt a fiberglass fish, a reproduction fish, in years past, before there was ever auto body putty and some of the other plastics, we used to make all of our reproduction fish out of plaster. So nothing changed in the process that we did. We would still lay the fish up in a bedding material. We'd pose him in something other than a reference material type pose. And we would pour a really nice coat of plaster, maybe 2 layers of plaster over him to make a splash coat like we talked about last week. Make a splash coat and then a little heavier coat. Peel that out, the fish out of him, and wash him up, put the fish back in, pour the other side, and you just made a mold that can be made a reproduction fish out of. Treat that mold exactly like Brett was talking about. Sanding sealer. You're going to want to put a mold release on it so your material doesn't get all over. And a lot of people, lots of good fiberglass fish people make their marketable positives out of auto body putty and resin.
Yep. Yep. And you'll see this will it'll pick up great detail. We'll pull it out. It would make a great positive to paint if you wanted to paint on that.
Okay, now we're gonna make a different mold, right?
So still in the theme of rigid molding materials.
Should we do that one?
I think we should. And this is getting very hot. A lot of heat generated, so the more catalyst you put in it, the hotter it's going to get. If you had your fingers in here and we're making a mold of your fingers, it's going to be real hot right now. Take it out.
Been there, done that.
I might have said that just because I knew you had.
Okay, now, back up to last week. This is the same thing we did last week, and we set this fish up in premium bedding fiber. Premium bedding fiber is an exceptional product for making fiberglass fish, reproduction jaw sets. I used to make bird bodies I used to mold my own bird bodies.
Sure.
I would take the real duck, pluck him perfectly, cut out his humerus and his femurs, sew up those, and I would make a mold of him, and then I would make foam positives out of that. That's how I made all of those.
Yep. Yep. They weren't very funny, were they? You cut the humerus out of them.
They don't even know. I don't think half the people don't appreciate all the funny stuff that we go through just to put on a presentation here.
We've had the humerus cut out of our...
Okay, now, do you need some little popsicle sticks or anything?
It's starting to separate. I just want to make sure we don't wait too long, so I hope not to interrupt you, but...
You interrupt when it's time.
I might grab a popsicle stick as a shim.
Okay, now I'm going to make a mixture just like we did to make Brett's positive that he's working on.
These floors must be squeaky clean. Oh yeah, I better.
Good to go?
Well, I'm afraid to let it get too much further.
You go.
So I might real quick, Kate, I think I'm gonna show them how I'm gonna pop this out.
If this doesn't work, we're going to have to switch the camera over here real quick.
We'll see. So I am just going to very carefully start separating this before it gets too hard. It's still a little soft, so I'm going to be careful. But the thick portion down here is really starting to firm up, so I wanted to make sure we lift that out carefully.
Now, I would like to interject here. You notice how that's coming out like really easy. It wants to fall out. If you didn't seal that, it would not work like this. If you did not wax it, it would not work like this. If you did not PVA it, it would not work like this.
Yeah, all of those things have to be in place in order for this system to work. And you want to show it to them?
No, you've gone to the work.
Ooh, that's kind of nice.
That's perfect, isn't it?
It really is. So here is our positive.
Yeah, zoom in on that if you can, Kate. That's
yeah,
that's a pretty part that any taxidermist could benefit from.
A great reference cast there. I do see a little piece that busted out here. I see it there in the mold.
That'd be easy fix with a little epoxy.
Super easy. But if you can see, if I turn it a little bit, you can see every scale, all of the...
Now that's detail picked up from a plaster mold. Plaster's cheap. Yeah. Plaster's very inexpensive.
Yeah.
Now imagine having spent the time to bed the entire fish in a customer-pleasing pose.
Yeah.
It would take a lot more time. It's going to take a little more bedding material, that sort of thing, and pour a plaster half of that, and then flip him over and do the other plaster half of that, and imagine pulling out a whole reproduction fish like that. I would do handstands.
Yeah, this is fantastic. This is really, really, really good.
Now, what jumps out at me is, now this fish has been in the freezer for quite some time, for sure a week. But I mean, just look at this muscle on his pectoral fin. Look at the roundness of his jaws.
Really nice and full. Just a whole bunch of information here. We could talk about this cast for quite some time, fish-wise. So a neat part, and you're going to show them how to do something with Bondo.
Okay, now we're going to do the same thing because we're talking about rigid molds. This is a rigid mold. Concrete lawn ornaments are made from rigid molds. You know, rigid mold is something like we talk about is rigid and non-flexing. So instead of say we want this, now this turned out so good that you could make, I bet you could, if you were careful, you could probably make 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 of these
I bet.
before you'd start losing something.
I didn't feel any resistance.
I didn't either.
That one little spot right there is going to come out nice and easy.
But oftentimes plaster does not stand the test of time when you're making repetitive casts. So then a lot of times we will make a Bondo mold, and I'm going to make the same mixture that we poured into your plaster mold. This is just going to confuse them terribly, I'm sure.
So now we're going to have a Bondo mold. So rather than having this part in Bondo, or in plaster, we're going to make this with Bondo. And what are we going to gain by using Bondo over plaster?
I was going to ask you that because that's a hard question. The mold is going to last a lot longer.
Yeah.
And we can make repetitive casts from that mold. Many, many, many.
And a couple other little things that in doing a fish, we have to flip him over. You can pour Bondo a little bit thinner. You can see how thick this plaster was to maintain its strength. We can make Bondo pretty strong and fairly thin so it doesn't cook the fish. We don't get quite as much heat buildup as we would with plaster, so that's another little benefit.
Like I mentioned last week, the catfish molds we made, and you helped me manhandle them. This is a 3-pound largemouth bass, half of a head.
Yeah.
Picture an 80-pound catfish, top and bottom of the mold.
Yes.
They really does weigh about almost 100 pounds a side. And it's very difficult to make a reproduction fish out of something like this. So if you can make the mold out of Bondo or fiberglass or something else, it's very helpful and lightweight. Okay, this is the same mixture that we poured in Brett's plaster mold, and I made it maybe a little bit, tiny bit thicker because I want it to stay up on the sides a little bit. And I'm going to put plenty of, that hardener was about right, wasn't it?
Yeah.
For a
yeah.
fast production.
Good. It was good for Facebook.
We would babysit it. If it was something in the shop, we'd probably mix it slower.
A little slower. But that's nice because we don't risk forgetting about it. If it's going to kick quickly, we can sit here and babysit it.
And some of you may be wondering about, we did a closed mouth. A closed mouth, say there's not as many problems with a closed mouth because we don't have, you can't get an interior out of a rigid mold. You'd have to make the mouth a little bit separate.
Yeah. And that's something with a lot of undercut, a lot of detail, and might not be as conducive to rigid molds. So although you could make your positive part in a couple pieces, and a lot of people do that too. Now
I'm going to, because mine's thicker, I'm going to work it in a few areas just by making sure it goes where I want it, up into the little cracks and crevices.
I've actually seen people take compressed air.
Sure.
And you can kind of force, you can get compressed air behind this and spray and push that Bondo a little bit into the detail. Bondo's fairly heavy, and so it picks up detail really nice. I don't think you have to do that, but it does make for
Now we
another way to do that.
We do a lot of reproduction fish and make plenty of them ourselves. And when we do that, even auto body putty, like I'm working with here, even auto body putty is breakable. So when this would set, we would take fiberglass mat and reinforce it with fiberglass mat, and that will give you, especially on a fish mold, you'll get many, many, many more positives out of a reinforced Bondo fish mold.
And again, just like we did with the plaster, if you take care of that mold, seal it well, wax it well, use a good separator like polyvinyl alcohol, you'll get a lot of positive pulls out of that Bondo mold.
And a good reproduction mold is actually pretty valuable, not just precious to you, but valuable to sell, you know.
Yeah.
This,
Absolutely.
not this, but if you made the whole fish, this, and it was a good fish, somebody's going to want that, you know.
I found myself in a bind for needing reference at one point for a competition fish.
So you bought a fiberglass fish.
I didn't. I called Jimmy and I said, hey, can you make me a couple,
I remember that.
couple little pieces and parts? And he just happened to have a mold that he was able to pull off the shelf, super handy, and poured just some little specific casts for me. So helpful. That was a lifesaver for me on parts that I realized too late that I didn't have. So take care of your molds. You never know when you'll need a little reference cast.
This still has your polyvinyl alcohol on it.
A nice coat of it. We could make more.
So we've shown you two different methods of making rigid molds. This is plaster, and watch last week how we took the fish and we washed him with aluminum sulfate to close up the pores. We got all the slime off because slime reacts with plaster and it will ruin your finish. You go to all this trouble and the inside surface would be ruined. Plaster is a good, inexpensive method. You can make easily small fish out of plaster. Years and years ago, I went to a seminar at one of the shows, and I want to say, I might be wrong, the guy's name was John Lawton, and he was tasked with reproducing all of the little trouts of Utah. And he worked for University of Utah or Brigham Young University or something like that. Is that in Utah?
I think so.
Something like that. It was a famous university, and that was his job. And I didn't know at the time, but there's 750 species of trout that don't get any bigger than this. He made them all out of plaster molds, and he made one for us at the show. And you think plaster is crude and doesn't pick up detail. It's picking up detail, little tiny detail.
Yeah.
So don't discount plaster. The other rigid mold is going to be a Bondo one or auto body, and we keep saying Bondo, so as you're watching us, can't find Bondo. That's generic in our language for auto body putty, and that's going to be another rigid mold. It's going to be much lighter weight. It will make more positives out of a auto body putty mold, and don't be afraid to take this farther. Get some extra bedding material and pose that whole fish and make a reproduction fish. There's methods, and you'll have to probably look up online how to cut the fins off, the paired fins.
Yeah.
But
and not just for fish, mammals. Anytime you find yourself needing a reference material for a good, if you get a good fresh fox, like you mentioned earlier, or other mammals, we'll likely save a deer head maybe this this fall and come back and revisit some of the molding and casting parts with other materials that may or may not be rigid.
And this is set up already. And like Brett said, keep feeling it. So it's because it's going to get warm. If this happen to be maybe a fish that you plan on mounting, don't let him cook in here. But pretty soon I will be able to pull this off of that fish, and I'm going to have one of those out of auto body putty.
I'm excited. This
good, huh?
nice.
We did good.
Yeah, we kind of did.
Sometimes the things that we show you on Thursday Live don't really come out like we want them to come out.
And modified on Friday.
And we have to fake it by putting our hands over and say, well, and that's all for this session. No, we do pretty good. We've had a little bit of experience. Now the worst thing is, watch pot never boils. The worst thing is rushing the process.
Yes.
And you'll be so excited, you'll think, oh, I think it's ready. Can we go now? I think we should go. And only to wreck it. But I could probably pull it off, you think?
Maybe.
Not yet?
One of the things to consider too is that Bondo or auto body putty reacts with heat. So the more heat there is, the faster it sets up. When we put this fish down here and the bedding material out of the refrigerator, those are both very cold. So you might be nicely setting up on the outside, but against that cold skin and cold bedding material, if you pull it off too early, it will interrupt your finish. Your finish will have just a rough texture.
That was Wingfield-ese for don't do it.
Maybe
don't
not yet.
do it.
But we got to give something away this week, don't we?
Oh, sure. And
What
we're
should we
giving
give
away, this week we're giving away, oh yeah.
The white stuff.
Oh, not that.
Oh, we can give them this too.
We should.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. We can make more. And the reason we can make more is our mold is in good shape.
Yep.
And we can make another one just like that. Okay, this is the giveaway today. How's that?
Perfect.
And
the
winner
goes
is,
to-
what if they don't do fish?
Well, then maybe they're just going to have to start. It goes to Stephanie Anderson.
Stephanie, congratulations. You just got a very, very, very nice largemouth bass cast.
Reference cast.
Now, what I would do with this is I would put a little hot glue or auto body putty on the back, take a little paper clip, big paper clip, and stick it on there so you got a little hook or wire.
Sure.
And hang it on the wall right next to your raccoons and your coons and your deer noses, bird feet,
Kate
and your
showed 'em
wall will
last
look
week.
just like ours.
Except cleaner.
Yeah,
Less
except
dust.
cleaner. So what do you think? I just can't wait anymore.
I think you should take it off, but Kate's going to have to show them.
I'm going to wreck it, aren't I?
No. No, I think it's ready. And if it's not, we can say, have a good night. Oh, there he is. Stuck. Look at that.
Not yet. Oh, get hurry.
Oh, that looks
That's another
nice.
good one.
That looks really nice.
Okay, and that is, now this one, same thing, two rigid molds. This one weighs 2 pounds. This one probably weighs less than a quarter pound. And the fish is easily mountable still. Now, when we used to use plaster and make the big catfish molds, it was necessary for the surface to set up good to leave them overnight. And they were soup the next morning. We poured them out of the mold.
Catfish soup.
We do good?
I think so.
Sometimes, like I said, things don't turn out. Stephanie, remember with your next order, you're going to get this signed by Brett and Tom, autographed copy of your bass
Nobody
head.
wants that.
And try this. Get some plaster. Get some auto body putty, and get some specimens, and make yourself some reference material. It's fun. It's easy. Get your kids involved. It's really fun for kids to play with. They love smoothing this
Halloween
stuff out. Yep. Good.